What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy, GS Luke, here with our live stream for this week's PGA Championship. Going to get you ready for all of your lineups tomorrow with a look at the weather report, any questions that you've got for me down there in the chat. We'll take a look at ownership, some game theory as well as the contests on DraftKings that are still available, and what you should be thinking about when you're putting together your builds. Anything on top of that, feel free to go ahead and fire down in chat. We already got a few of you down there, so we got Anthony down there, a question that we'll get to here in just a little bit. Big Chops, BD, Michael, Ross as well, some regulars down there. And like Ross says, it is major championship week, so let's get into it. A lot of people seem to be excited down there in the chat as well. And welcome on in C. Floyd. We got Prep Drone down there as well. And like C. Floyd said, the first thing you need to do as you guys are getting into this live stream is first off, say hi down there in the chat, but also smash that like button for the SHIPIT Nation crew. But any other questions you've got, feel free to go ahead and let me know. So let's go through first off what we have with the weather, which is a good starting point just so that I can redirect people back to this section if they have questions later. And what we have for Thursday is a weather forecast that favors the AM side. You can see some lower winds for the first 4, maybe 5 hours of play. Afternoon, it gets closer to the 12 to 13 miles an hour sustained range. So it's not going to be overly windy out there, not anything like 20, 30 mile an hour wind gusts, but it does go from pretty much no wind to a little breeze out there in the afternoon. So that combined with the greens firming up as the day goes on has me thinking that the AM side might play a little bit easier than the afternoon, but nothing drastic, maybe like a half a stroke difference. And then when we go over to Friday, we don't have the full HRRR yet, but you can see it's the same kind of trend going on. The first 3 hours of play look relatively calm. It's getting spicy around at 10, 11 a.m., but because we don't have the entire forecast yet, it's tough to say based on this HRRR. So what I usually default to at this time of the week is looking at the NEM model, which is completely loaded in for Friday. And in the morning, it looks very similar to what we had on Thursday morning, whereas in the afternoon, it kicks up a little bit. So as of right now, the HRRR on Thursday and then the NEM model on Friday, it looks very flat between the 2 days. I don't see any sort of a massive weather edge to lean into. Not to say that if you're a 150 maxer, you have to completely ignore wave stacking. It's just that I don't think it's one where you go all in on it. It's maybe a 10, 15%er that you throw in either direction. The vast majority of your lineups should probably be played pretty straight up. And it takes a pretty massive weather edge for me to go all in on one side or the other. And based on these kind of weather forecast, we're just not getting that for the first few days. And if you're a round one showdown player, I like to throw that out there as well. I don't know if there's going to be a big enough edge to only play those AM wave guys. So I'm personally going to stay away from playing showdown. I don't see a massive edge as of right now. But if we circle back to the averages after round one, and it was closer to a 0.75 to 1 stroke difference towards the AM guys, we know that over there for Friday then. So rounds 2 through 4 showdown, you're also going to be able to find that live stream over here on the SHIPIT Nation YouTube channel. So subscribe to the channel if you guys haven't already, so you guys don't miss any of that single round content for the next few days. And outside of that, I like to bring up my projections next and to talk about some ownership and game theory heading into slate, because you've seen a bunch of pieces of content at this point. I imagine the vast majority of you at least have consumed quite a bit at this point. When we get to Wednesday, the weather becomes especially important. But other than that, it's about the ownership angle, because on Monday and Tuesday, when all those touts are putting out their plays, people were trying to figure out who they wanted to take towards the top end of the board. Nobody had ownership projections that were relatively accurate. I mean, Monday, Tuesday, a few sites might throw out some early stuff, but you don't really get anything accurate until today. So we're going to mention what you should be thinking about towards the top end of the board, where I think some of the chalky builds are going to be going over the first for the main slate, and how you can either leverage yourself off of that or potentially get different within that chalky kind of game stack. So now's the time, by the way, for any specific player pool questions that you have. We're going to go through a few guys that I'm using myself in my player pool. We're going to talk about why I have all 3 of these guys down as a yes. There is a rhyme and reason for that, as well as some value plays down towards the bottom. So we're going to have part of the process behind how I used to build my player pool. We're going to give you that with some of those plays, as well as some strategy throughout the process. But before we go into any specific questions, do want to talk about the game theory at the top first. And you can see over here on this F tab, so the one I had highlighted right here, this is all the projected ownership for main slate. And I'm going to have all the players on here from 8K plus for you guys. These are from my Patreon page, so these are not the SHIPIT Nation projections. I have a website I run on myself running projections for every single event. And this is just to give you perspective on to what I'm thinking about up top, because there's a very clear lineup construction that is playing out. It's a double stud. It's the studs and duds. If you guys have seen that out there before, that is going to be by far the most popular build for this week. And when you take a look at the ownership, it becomes very obvious. You've got 3 guys over 20% at the top, and they're all going to cost you an arm and a leg at 11K plus, over 12K for Rory, over 13K for a Scotty Scheffler, and they're all coming in at over that 20% ownership. In fact, 30% for a Rory McIlroy, and combined ownership of these 3 players is nearly 80% between all of them. So a lot of lineups, they're going to be starting with at least one of those 3 players and then dropping down and taking another spend up. And it might be a Patrick Cantlay, who's towards the bottom end of that 9K range at $9,500. It could be a Justin Thomas, who is the most popular second man in that you have on the slate there at $9,900. And the reason why this lineup construction works, because if we had the normal pricing for DraftKings, there's no way we'd have this kind of ownership, but it goes down to $5,000 this week, and it changes up that ownership dynamic, especially when you have this 5K range full of guys that are legit plays. And there's going to be a couple I point out. You see Jakara, you see McKibben. I'll mention why I like them later. It's not so much to give you plays, but it's the process I want to point out with those kind of options. But because there's usable players there in the 5K range, that double spend up is going to be a lot more popular than it would be otherwise. So going with one of these top 3 and then one of these 9K players is going to be how a vast majority of people start their lineups. And what that does is, when we scroll down here a little bit, is look at the low ownership in this 8K range. You've got guys that are sub 5%, Cam Smith 2.7%, 2.5% on a Will Zalatoris, and then even these guys like a Jason Day at 5%, a Henley at 7.7%. All of these are very attractive ownership numbers, and I think people would play them if they could. They're better players, so what you have at the bottom end, middle end of the 7K range. But because the popular lineup construction is going to be to take one of these 3 guys, they drop down here and throw in one of these 9K players on top of it, you don't have the salary to take one of these 8K range players. In fact, you don't start to see the ownership start to tick back up until you get to the bottom end of that 8K range. And it helps that you have a Corey Connors in excellent form, a Patrick Reed who has really good course history around here. If you've watched my content this week on my channel, you'd know that I love Patrick Reed, and then I'm using him for a top 10 as well. So despite the ownership, he is making my way into the player pool. But because people are doing the double spend up and then dropping down, if you want to get different right off the board, you don't even have to do it with the players that you're choosing. The different lineup construction would be to maybe avoid one of these top 3, but even if you take one of these top 3 players, to drop down just a little bit further. And it's tempting when you have a JT who won recently, Joaquin Niemann with multiple wins on the LIV Tour this year. I mean, he's been electric on that side. One of the best players in the world, many people would say. If you drop down just a little bit further, though, and it's not even that much further, it's like $600, $700 down in that pricing. A Russell Henley, I know the form maybe isn't as shiny as some of those 9K range players, but you're getting half the ownership of some of the guys there in the mid 9K range. So the lineup construction, the ownership up top is very clear in my opinion. Not to say that you can't have that chalky sort of lineup construction. You can see that I like these top 3 players. Guys like JT are going to be core plays for me. I like myself some Brooks Koepka, Joaquin Niemann in lineups as well. I'm going to have some of these chalkier lineup construction lineups, but I'm really going to have to force my hand down low with the ownership. And I mentioned showing you a way to get different with the lineup construction. I'm going to be doing that at times, but I'm going to have a lot more lineups that are built a lot more traditionally. And if you're going to build in the more traditional fashion, I don't think that that is a mistake on a slate like this because I'm doing it myself. It's just that it's going to be harder to get that differentiation down low. That is why I'm so intentional about pointing out these pivot plays like a Chikara, a McKibben. We'll go through Højgaard later, Thomas Dietrich at sub 3%, because I'm going to have to get different with my 5, 6, and 7K range players. So my strategy for this week, at least with how I'm building lineups, again, it doesn't have to be exactly how you're choosing to do so yourself, is to build in that chalky fashion because I see the win equity up here being too far to pass up. I think that one of these top 3 could very likely win. I would throw on top of that a Xander, John Rahm, and Justin Thomas. I think of those 6 players, right, these 3 of them, those top 3, one of those 6 is most likely going to win this event. And if I think that's going to be the case, I'm going to want one of those 6 players, at least one of them, if not 2 of them, out there in every lineup that I'm building. Now, if you have a lot more of your win equity further down the board, like let's say that you bet yourself a Brooks this week, who I think is a sharp bet. I didn't do it myself, but I think he is a sharp bet you'd play. Maybe Cantlay, the Spieths of the world. You think these guys have more win equity than the market is giving them? then you could really get a lot of leverage off of getting off those top tier players. But I personally don't have that same sort of confidence. So that's how I'm handling the top end of the board. That's where the ownership is coming in. You can see some of the specific ownership numbers on here for that 8K range plus. But for anyone from 7K range and below, you can find those over there on my Patreon page. But for anyone that you're specific about, anyone that you're curious about in particular, just let me know down in the chat. I'm more than willing to go over those with you guys there together. Just can't post the whole sheet here publicly. A lot of you probably understand that are part of websites there. But yeah, I'm willing to talk about players here for the sake of discussion for sure. Let's get to the questions now. Then we're going to go through some of those value plays I like towards the bottom. So any player deep dives, feel free to go ahead and let me know. So Anthony's question here towards the beginning, he had a question on the type of greens that we have this week. So whether it's overseeded POA or Bermuda, the answer is both. And it's a pretty nuanced question, but it's a Bermuda grass base where they put POA Trivilis overseed on top of it. And as you get further into the year, this is towards the end of overseed season, the Bermuda grass starts to bud through. And on the GCS AA site, that's the Greenskeeper Association website for all of you stat nerds out there, they said that it's 50-50 this week. They said that it's like 50% the underlying Bermuda, 50% that POA Trivilis overseed. So that's been the situation for the last month or so. We've had a lot of courses with this kind of overseed. Florida Swing had it at every golf course. Texas Swing, you had it at every golf course as well, except for one of them. So we've had this situation for quite some time. So if you look at courses with that kind of agronomy, it would be very useful on a week like this. So good question. I've seen people kind of citing both things, but it is both together actually. So next question, where we leave off. Finally able to catch a live stream, you said. Nice to have you there, Mario. He said, you always have to watch it after. It's great to have you live, though, because if you have any questions, you can hit me up with them. He said, 2 guys under 6K. Yeah, I'm going to have some lineups with 2 guys under 6K. We'll go through a few players that could be options for that as well. He said, are the fairways easy to hit? Historically not, no. Normally it's about a 55% fairway rate around here. Last year it was closer to 8.7 fairways per round, a little bit over 60% because it was softer conditions. So with the fact that they had a ton of rain here Monday and Tuesday, it's probably going to be closer to that 8.7 fairway mark. So a lot of fairways being hit. I wouldn't say that they're easy to hit though, especially when they're running firm and fast. What's going on, Mass Breaks? He said he just joined SHIPIT Nation. I'm still learning and navigating the material, but you like it. Yeah, man, it's a lot of fun over there. I think that they've got some great tools out there. He said, any faves for round 1 leaders? You can only access underdog. None that have bet yet, Mass. So maybe consider some of the plays that we go through here you can use for a first round leader, but nothing that I've bet myself. So I don't want to lead you astray with just some random play. So that's why we're over here on this live stream doing it, but maybe he surprises us. Who knows? How do you know what to look for in the first round showdown? Round 1 showdown isn't something I play. The process, though, would be very similar to main slate. You don't have any data to work with. That's why it's not something I normally play a whole bunch of, because my showdown process for rounds 2 and 3 is very specific. I use shots gained metrics to my advantage. I use a lot of what we saw from round number 1. And without that, I am kind of clueless. That's why I don't normally play a lot of round 1 showdown. If I was going to, a weather edge would be where I'd start for that kind of a slate. And then it'd be a lot of my main slate stuff, because in terms of building a player pool, you have no different information for round 1 showdown other than you can look for spike performances. I look for high upside players all the time in showdown. That's good par 5 scoring. That's good birdie or better percentage. You could do that as well, I guess. That'd be the main thing to lean into. Is Finau getting steamed? I haven't seen a lot of content steaming him up, but honestly, I don't watch content to begin with. So maybe he is getting steamed. I honestly wouldn't be able to tell you. How do I feel about Patrick Reed? I love him this week, Mario. So somebody that I bet for a top 10 that we're going to mention a little bit later. He's getting some ownership. So just like a Corey Connors here, I've got him over 10% ownership, which compared to the guys above him that are sub 5% is quite a drastic change. That's 3-4 times the ownership compared to some of these other players around him. but I do think he sets up well. He's got 3 top 8 finishes in his last 4 starts here. That would be at the Quail Hollow Club, and that was a long time ago, but Patrick Reed's had a really good start to the year. He's one of the top 10 players on the LIV Tour so far, so yeah, I like myself some Patrick Reed, and unfortunately, though, a lot of other people do. Of course, Joanne, let me know if you have any questions. Any thoughts on Chikara and Olesen? So yeah, Chikara we're going to mention later, so I'll hold my thoughts on him so I can give them to everyone together. Thorbjorn Olesen, his form has been decent. The only issue I have with him, Anthony, is I had to do a deep dive on him myself because he was popping in some of this stuff I was looking at, is that they're at alternate field events. It's the weak field stuff where he's gone out there and had his top 10s. I want to see Thorbjorn do it in an actual event, something that matters, something that isn't like the Myrtle Beach Classic, for example, when he finishes top 10. It's got to be at this sort of event before I'm going to be a buyer. So we'll talk about Chikara. I like him, though. Are you the only one who likes DJ this week? I like some DJ. I've got him in lineups. He's sub 5%. He's not going to be one of the guys that we mentioned as a value play, but if you're looking for a low-owned GPP flyer, a lot of risk with the DJ. He's got missed cut equity in the 7K range, which there's a lot safer options that you could take around him, but he's a major winner. DJ, when he plays well, he normally wins or top 5s on the LIV Tour. You're not going to see him finishing top 15 that often over there. It's really all or nothing for DJ, which is why I say he's a large field GPP play. His cash and single entries, it's a little bit too much risk for a lot of people's taste. But in a 150 max, a $5, big $25 contest, makes perfect sense to get to that sort of player. So do it in the right contest, I would say. You said 8K dead zone has you wanting to skip the 9K range. Yeah, so I mentioned that as a potential pivot off of going with the double spend up. I think that would be a sharp way to change up the lineup construction. I don't think you have to, but it is a sharp way to do that. And then you said raise the min price for your punts. I don't think you have to raise the min price for the punts. So I agree with the first part there. The second part, though, I think would be overthinking it because the guys in the 5K range, with the exception of like 2 guys, are all under 5%. So I don't think you have to avoid that range just to try and get different, because if you're forced down into that 5K range, it's the same situation we have with Scotty at the CJ Cup. I played him in almost every lineup that I played. I think it was like 85% because I knew using him forced me into the 6K range that week. And it was uncomfortable. A lot of guys down there sucked, but I knew that be sub 3-4% owned. I knew no one was going to use a lot of guys in that portion of the board. So I didn't worry about the 40-45% ownership on Scotty because of who it got me down low. So that's why I would say don't raise your minimum price for the punts, because it's almost a good thing to have guys down there sometimes, especially if you choose the right players. Avoid some of the guys that are closer to 5% and you'll be good down there. Are Jaeger and Spawn both high owned? So let me double check my projections just because I don't want to feed you wrong information. I don't believe they are, though. I believe both of them are sub 5%, but I'll do a little double check for you just in case. So JJ Spawn, yeah, I actually do have JJ Spawn getting some ownership. I wouldn't call him chalk, though. He's like 1 to 2% higher than some of the other guys around him. And then let me find Steven Jaeger on the sheet. Good old Steven, Steven Jaeger's a bomber. If you're a believer in that narrative, you could fit some lineups that you're using. And he's a little bit lower owned than JJ Spawn. So between the 2 players, it is about a 3% difference between Jaeger and a Spawn. So yeah, Jaeger's definitely not chalk. Spawn is a little bit higher owned, but I wouldn't classify him as overly high owned or anything like that. Let's see where we leave off. A question, he said, thoughts on Rahm. So he's playing fantastic on the LIV Tour. For whatever reason, has not translated to major success. Same thing with a Joaquin Niemann. He's played very well over there, has yet to have top 5, top 10s in majors whatsoever. I would say that those are the kind of players that I would rather be early on than late. We know they're world-class guys. I mean, Rahm, major winner, multiple-time major winner, somebody on the PGA Tour that was arguably the best player that you had in the world before he left. So yeah, give me some Jon Rahm, and same thing with guys like a Niemann. He won on the PGA Tour before he left. He's won big time fields like the Genesis before he left out there for LIV Tour. I'm willing to buy low on those players because the ownership on a player like Rahm, as you guys can see up here towards the top, it's not overly high. He's getting some ownership there at 13.5%, but he's markedly lower owned than a Justin Thomas and maybe a little bit higher owned than a Colin Morikawa, but he's a better course fit. He's a much better total driver of the golf ball than Morikawa. Morikawa more of that plotter accuracy guy, whereas a Jon Rahm is accurate and long off the tee, which pays a lot of dividends at this course. anything to follow with the weather? So if you go back to about the 3-minute mark, Steve, you can find my full thoughts on the weather, but not much. I think it's pretty flat for Thursday and Friday. So if you want to skip it, I'd understand. I don't think there's that much there. Is there any interest in late edition Smalley? So you can't play him in DFS, so no. They're not going to add him to the pricing unless they have and they snuck it under the radar. But their policy, at least for my concern, what I understand, is within 24 hours, they can't add anyone to the player pool. So if they added them, maybe, but yeah, unfortunately not in there. So thoughts on Bryson. So Bryson's one of my core plays this week. I love Bryson up top. I like all three of them. The only one I bet outright, and my only outright bet that I played this week, is Scottie Scheffler. So I took him at plus 400. I wanted plus 850 on Bryson, and his number just kept dropping throughout the week. So I missed the boat on Bryson. Couldn't take that outright number. I'll mention the outright on Scottie. So I did bet him there. I love Scottie. I like all three of these guys. I don't think you can really go wrong with any of them. I couldn't choose between them, so I'm using all three. That's why I have all three in there. The Scottie Scheffler bet, though, there's a promotion that they have on Hard Rock Bet, where if your guy finishes top 5 but doesn't win the event, you get your money back. I chose the bet Scottie because his top 5 number is even money on most sports books. So let's assume that he has 40% top 5 equity. They have some juice involved with all those props, so we've got to adjust it a little bit. But let's assume that he's got 40% top 5 equity. That means almost half the time I'm getting my money back on this Scottie Scheffler bet, let alone if he wins at 4-1, all the payout I can get with that. So the promo bet, by the way, was like maxed out at $250. So it's not quite the full unit size bet I'd want to place out there on a Scottie Scheffler, but it's nearly a free roll, right? It's almost like a half free roll out there on that sort of bet. So yeah, I bet him $13,400. But yeah, Bryson, I wanted to bet. I just couldn't find the number that I was looking for. But in DFS purposes, I'll be using him. He said, with a lot of content hyping up distance and power, is there a path for the shorter, accurate guys to do well? There is a path for them, Zachary, but after they put out the fact that there won't be lift clean in place, they announced that at least they're trying not to use lift clean in place. They mentioned being able to mow the fairways, which is going to be key before that sort of thing. That would take away that advantage, because if being accurate mattered the first few rounds with lift clean in place, I could see that kind of thing. It's going to be a real tough thing to pull off otherwise. Now, is there going to be a short player in the top 10? For sure, because that's just how golf works. There's 156 players. One of those kind of guys is going to have a good week. But out of the top 10, 6 or more are going to be guys that are above average distance. I'm not going to say pure bombers, because bombers implies like top 10, 20% distance, right? But above average distance guys are going to be at least 6, maybe even 7 of that top 10. So it'll be tough for those guys to get there, but it is never impossible. Look at Brian Harmon at US Opens before. There's other examples of guys like Kevin Kisner having success at these kind of golf courses. In fact, the last time we were at Quail Hollow for the PGA Championship, your 54-hole leader was Kevin Kisner. So it is within the range of outcomes, but it is really tough to get there. You said right-handed players have an advantage at hitting fairways. It depends on which way you move it, left or right, because if you're a drawer versus a fader, it could work both ways. Thoughts on Hatton? So Hatton's ownership is a little bit lower than some of the guys around him at 9.9%, but he's not down there in those like 5% range like a lot of these other guys here. So to me, he's a very average play on the slate like this. From the ownership angle, though, you're not going to be taking chalk down here, which is kind of nice. And if you're dropping down, let's say from like a JT, one of these guys in the 9K range where your line of construction is going to be very similar to the rest of the field, and you're getting down to a Hatton, you're not only getting that 3 to 4% ownership discount, but you're also getting a little bit of that lineup construction difference where it's going to force you onto different salaries for your last 4 spots. So I kind of like Hatton for that reason. It's why I like a Tommy Fleetwood here as well, even at that 13.5% mark, because it's a little bit cheaper down the board than some of those other pieces of chalk that people are using as their second man in. So I'm intrigued by that kind of lineup construction. You said you were going to ask yourself, you're worried that he's not long enough, but he's ranking well in the models. So let me see. Yeah, thoughts on Hatton, you were saying. I'm okay with Hatton's distance. I mean, he hits the ball a long way with his carry. He doesn't get any rollout. He hits the ball very high. That's the reason for that. And he's got a good long iron play as well. So I'm okay with Hatton. Like he's like a 5.5, 6 out of 10. I like the lineup construction aspect the most, though. Corey Connors has been consistent. Do I think he catches some steam? He always seems to get steam. Every time you look at his projected ownership after lock on Thursdays, it's like 15% on almost every single event. So I would say that there's a chance from that. He said, have I heard from DGen? Hope he's doing well. I haven't, but I'll reach out to him and see how he's doing. He's hopefully kicking cancer's ass right now. That'd be awesome to hear. First round leader for Smalley. Dude, yeah, those guys that get in last second, they seem to do it all the time. Most recently, by the way, Cameron Champ got in as an alternate, wasn't even available on DraftKings and was -7 through the first round. So there's a precedent for that. Could I rank Vegas, Thompson, Berger? So Berger's a little bit more expensive than those two. So he's kind of like the no-brainer number one. I'd go Berger, Thompson, Vegas out of those three. Smalley is 18th at the 2023 Wells Fargo. I've seen crazier things happen, man. Like, especially with Cameron Champ doing it recently. Go ahead and bet it, at least for all of our sake here. Any love for Jake Knapp? I like the driving distance and the long iron play for Knapp. I think that this kind of off the tee test sets up well for his game. It's a little bit of a worry around the green for me. He's yet to prove it at a major championship, but he also has next to no experience at major championships. So we can't really hold it against him all that much that he hasn't done it at these golf courses before. Man, he has less than 4 tries at all these really difficult kind of tracks. So yeah, I like myself a little bit of Jake Knapp. Max Homa, I'm a little bit more skittish on. Not to say that I think he's a terrible play here. He's got fantastic course history. So if you're looking for a reason to play Max Homa, it is there. His success at Quail Hollow speaks for itself. Even at the President's Cup here, had a lot of success. Jordan Spieth, by the way, a lot of you may have seen my tweet on Monday about Jordan Spieth, but when they played the President's Cup here, Homa had a lot of success, but guess who went 5-0 at the President's Cup that year? My guy, Jordan. So maybe not the best track record at the Wells Fargo. Unlike Max Homa, he's also played well at the Wells Fargo. Jordan Spieth, though, 5-0 at the President's Cup. Keep an eye on him. Thoughts on Berger? So he's been playing really good golf recently, James, but I worry that he's a little overhyped. The reason I say that is that he's played a lot of the weaker field events. He's played a lot in 2025 because he's trying to secure his status going forward, secure his status in the signature events for next season. But in these big time events, I want to see him get us those top 5, those top 10s. And he's done it once or twice. It's not like he hasn't shown us a little bit of it so far this year. It's just that I worry that now we're buying the peak, that he's gone up in price. He's going to have some ownership and some GPPs too. That would be the worry for me. Thoughts on Matt McCarty? So McCarty, not the longest player off the tee. So from the bomber narrative, that's the one argument against him. My argument for playing Matt McCarty every time that he's teeing it up is that he's a tour winner in his first 3 starts. That does not happen often. It happened for Garrick Higgo, and I saw so many people shitting on Garrick Higgo over the years. I mean, he lost his sponsors. He hit rock bottom on tour, but guess what winners do? Winners win, and Garrick Higgo won in his second ever PGA Tour start, and he won a few weeks ago at Corrales. So Matt McCarty, that's not going to go away. He's going to be somebody I'm over the field on more often than not out there on tour. This week, though, at this specific golf course, it's not my favorite course fit. I just don't think he has the driving distance to take on a Quail Hollow like some of the other guys priced around him. But at other events, really anything that's not like 75 plus 100 yards, yeah, give me Matt McCarty, man. He's a stud. He said, will the weather being flat the first couple of days give me some more scoring than usual? I think so. I've got the scoring average for tomorrow about a half a stroke over par, which for a major championship is really good scoring compared to what we mostly see. That's actually even a little bit easier than what we had for the Wells Fargo last year, but they could surprise us with some really tough pin locations. So we'll have to see that before we really know. Any good course fits that might pop but don't have a consistent major history? That is too broad of a question for me, Sites, because none really come to mind when you ask that. Thoughts on thoughts? Not sure what you're saying. Thoughts on thoughts on thoughts. Okay. What did I say that at some point? I don't get it. How about McCarthy and Novak this week? McCarthy's more of like an accuracy guy, but he's played really well at some of like the Memorial type of courses. So that's a Muirfield Village. I could see myself some Denny McCarthy. And then I'm assuming you're talking about Andrew Novak with that second one there. And Andrew Novak has also played very well this year, but kind of like a McCarty, he's not my favorite course fit at courses that are more accuracy based off the tee. So I would stick to McCarthy out of those two players just because he's shown it to us at these style of golf courses before, but I would leave it there. And I'm still very confused on why you guys are saying thoughts on thoughts, but we'll leave it there, I guess. Let's talk through a few plays that I wanted to add on top of it. So towards the bottom end of the board, Robert McIntyre is a low-owned play that I like in this 7K range. And there's a few others that you could consider too. Like there's a Dustin Johnson at $7,600 who could make sense. But Robert McIntyre plays well hard off the tee test. You saw him win the Genesis Scottish Open when conditions got tough. A lot of deep rough over there in Scotland. So at $7,500, I know that he hasn't played well at Hollow quite yet. He doesn't have a lot of starts at the Wells Fargo. Give me some Robert McIntyre. He's a tour winner. He's won multiple times out there around different tours. DP World Tour won 3 or 4 times. And I'm not expecting him to win this kind of event. You don't even need anything close to a win to pay off $7,500. But a top 10 performance would not surprise me in the least. And I thought he'd get some steam because if you remember at the Masters, he was mega chalk at $7,800. He was one of the most popular guys on the slate at the kind of price tag. And now he's sub 5% owned at a golf course that I think fits his game even better. Augusta, wide open off the tee. You can't really separate yourself when it comes to that shots gained with the accuracy and your distance. McIntyre, when he's playing his best golf, is somebody that hits fairways and he hits it a long way. So at 3.6% ownership, I'm going to be using him for some leverage here compared to players that are a lot higher owned. To give you an example of some of the players getting steam, Keegan Bradley, I've got getting steam at $7,200. He's going to be well over 6-7% owned. I've also got let me think. Not a bunch of chalk here. Max Homa getting more steam than you might expect, but your Bergers, your Straka's here. And I know Berger, his ownership is blacked out, but I've got him at about 10% ownership, just like the Sepp Strakas of the world. So, if I'm going to start with that more popular start, one of those first 3 and then a 9K guy as my second man in, these are the sort of players that can get you off that really chalk lineup construction. Thomas Dietrich is another player that I'm getting over the field on. He is $7,000, and I've got him at just 2.8% ownership. Somebody that has played well at difficult golf courses. In fact, for evidence of that, take a look at last year's PGA Championship, where he finished in the top 5. And it was another soft PGA Championship where he had softer fairways, also softer greens to go out there and attack. And the first few days this week, you're going to get those same kind of conditions. And while Saturday, Sunday, I think the course is going to dry out real nicely, at least for the first round or two. He's going to have a similar setup to last year. So 2.8% ownership, a pivot off of some of the more popular plays here, which included Dean Burmester. He's going to get some steam in lineups. A Harris English, kind of surprising to me that he's getting all that kind of steam. But yeah, give me those Thomas Dietrichs instead. Players that are like half, sometimes even a third of the ownership of those other options that I think have the same, if not in some cases, better equity to go out there in top 5, top 10. You've also got a Nikolai Højgaard here at $6,500. I've got him at 2.2% projected ownership. He's a player that's long off the tee. He's a bomber. He has well over a 310-yard carry. And he's also a player that's good from 170-plus yards. So the kind of player that on those longer par 3s, the longer par 4s, he's not going to have any issues reaching the green. And if he does miss fairways, which happens for Højgaard, he's got the club head speed to use those long irons and still reach the green complex. So, and a lot of the kind of advanced models that I use for the long-term stuff, you can see the longer-term model over here. This is the course fit tab, is a lot more favorable than the recent form stuff. So, if people are going to be completely thrown off the scent here just because of how he's played over the last 12 rounds, in that sample size, he is losing about a stroke per round, then so be it. That's why we're getting that 2% ownership mark out there. The more and more you zoom out on a Nikolai Højgaard's game, the better he is. And you're going to get some bounce backs. I for sure think form is helpful to have in a major championship, but in that top 15, I guarantee you that there's 1, 2, maybe even 3 surprise players that are not coming in with good form that still go out there and surprise us. I'm still playing some Keith Mitchell, but he would not be a pivot towards the bottom. You can see at about 10% ownership, he is well above the average ownership in this range. Not to say that you can't use him, but if I'm going to use a Keith Mitchell at this kind of ownership number, it's likely not with a whole bunch of chalk up top. And if I still am using players that have some ownership up top, it's not in the chalky lineup construction. It might be by taking one of those top 3 players and then jumping down into that 8K range where I can find some of those players at sub 5%. So if I do that, I take that road less traveled, a line of construction that isn't as popular, you can easily afford to take a Keith Mitchell because your lineups with the Keith Mitchell are going to look so much different than what you have with the rest of the field. So that's always why it's not who you play, it's how you play them out there in lineups that really matters. And I think Keith Mitchell is a perfect example of the kind of guy where you really have to consider that. before you use them in any lineups. But a pivot off of a Keith Mitchell that I'm using when I need to get different, when, I'm using a more popular start, would be Keith Mitchell here at $6,200. He's 3.5% projected owned there at $6,200. He's played long, hard golf courses quite well. He's played the API well. He won that in a signature level field. So he's gone toe to toe out there with the world's best. And we don't need a win out of Kurt Kitayama. Top 5 or top 10 would be more than enough at this kind of price tag. In the short-term stuff, last 12 measured rounds, it's not the best. They're at number 61 in the field, but some of the long-term course fit stuff is a little bit more favorable on a Kurt Kitayama. So sub 5% ownership, if I need to get off of a 10% owned Keith Mitchell, it's not just Kurt Kitayama that I'm using, but there are going to be other guys in this range too. For example, like a Jake Knapp, who we had the question about before and that I am using in some of my GPP lineups. And then the last few guys I want to go through is Gary Woodland was one of the plays I talked up on my channel on Monday. Took him for a top 10 at plus 1,300. He's a little bit higher owned than some of the guys around him, partially because of pieces of content like my own going out there and pumping him up. But a Chikara could be a pivot off of him. A Tom McKibben down here at $5,600 could also be a pivot off of a Gary Woodland. You're getting at sub 2.5% ownership. Chikara's won on the DP World Tour recently. He's been in contention multiple times over the last month and a half. In fact, he's choked a few 54-hole leads on that side of the pond. And while the DP World Tour is a much lower level of competition than the PGA Tour or even the LIV Tour, it's still a really good tour out there. It's still very impressive to have those top fives, to be in contention to win on that side of the pond. So 2.5% ownership. We're looking for that top 10 to top 15 to pay off. And he's got the kind of skill set to pay off at this golf course. He's long off the tee, a bomber that can hit the ball a long way. So yeah, $5,800. You can give me a little bit of that. And then McKibben, he's playing on the LIV Tour. He's had a couple down weeks recently. In fact, last week he lost a whole bunch of strokes to the field on the LIV side. But at $5,600, he's had top 5 finishes on LIV this year. He's had multiple top 20 finishes. And on the DP World Tour, before he signed for LIV, he had like top 20s in almost every single event over there. So one of the most consistent young up-and-coming superstars that you had on the European Tour that now has his services in the LIV League. So not a lot of people are going to see him. You're not going to have a whole bunch of hype behind a young Tom McKibben. But I can tell you for a fact that if he was on the DP World Tour, he probably would have won already this year, probably that week that he top 5'd on the LIV Tour, and he'd be chalked this week. It'd probably be like $6,500, 10% owned. He's a bomber off the tee. He's a really good long iron player. If he was on the DP World Tour, he'd for sure be getting his PGA Tour card next year. That's how good this kid is. He would, for a lock, I can just tell you certainty, unless he got injured, he would have been top 10 on the DP World Tour this year. Give me some Tom McKibben at $5,600 because no one else seemingly wants to use him. And there are a few other guys below this number that I will be using in my player pool, but you don't have to go the whole way down. You start to get some real slapdick players the further down in this 5K range that you go, like especially from $5,300 and cheaper. There's hardly anyone down there that I really think is playable, but $5,500, $5,600, there's legit players here. You've got Patrick Rogers that I've seen in a lot of content this week. Seamus Power, who's got pretty good course history. Echevarria, who was really popping in my course breakdown this week. I'm using Echevarria, for example, out there in my player pool. There are a lot of legit guys that you can use that make that double spend up work. And when there are so many players down there that I think are viable, that's why it's hard to avoid that kind of lineup construction. And while it makes my life a little bit more complicated when it comes to getting that differentiation, it's far from impossible. You just have to be very intentional about those last 4 spots and where you're getting different to the field. And it doesn't even just have to be with the ownership and the players that you're using. You can do it with leaving salary on the table. If you want to leave $400, $500 on the table, it is almost for sure going to ensure that you're not duplicating yourself with other lineups, and it's going to give you some leverage from the lineup construction angle as well. So there's a lot of different ways that you can take getting different to the field, even if you are using that more popular option up top. So that's the ownership. Those are some of the plays down low that I like. And it's not just to give you guys players to use yourself. It's the thought process and what I'm thinking about that really matters there. And if you're going to take anything away from this sort of a live stream, it's that aspect. It's learning how to actually play DFS instead of just being handed your fish out there for any given night, right? Because as soon as the person giving the fish goes away, right, what are you going to do for your own sort of process, right? I'd rather, bring you guys along in the process, teach you guys a little something about game theory as we go through these live streams so that over time you can become even better PGA DFS players. And it might make my job a little bit harder to go out there and beat you guys, but I'm working on my process all the time as well. I'm trying to make myself an even sharper player every single slate that I'm going out there and playing, whether it's looking at my exposure after the fact, duplication rates, whether I'm making sure I have enough of leverage in the builds that I'm using, even tinkering around with new roles in my optimizer. It's all in an effort to go out there and become a better tout and player over there in those GPPs. So that's what I have out there from the game theory angle. I'll go over any last second questions that you have about players, but we're going to go over the DraftKings next, take a look at some of the contests that are available real quickly, and then put a lineup or two together to give you an idea of the thought process too. But let me get a sip of water and we'll catch up on that. Let's see. So yeah, a few questions. Said, who do I like better, Thorbjornsen or Phillips? So those two were playing together at Zurich. I like that group. They won me a lot of money that week. So I have a soft spot for both of them. I'd go with Thorbjornsen, though. He is longer between the two. Phillips is probably 15 yards shorter than Thorbjornsen. And I'm a big believer in the bomber kind of mattering around here. So, yeah, I'd rather go that direction. Harris English is a big game hunter, grinder, bulldog. I agree with all of that. But do we think he's twice as good as everyone else around him? I would say no. But I've been wrong before, and he's played well at these courses before. Most notably API, similar type of test. So I kind of get why the ownership's there. I won't be there myself, though. I just can't do it. How gross of a click is Nick Dunlap? Oh, boy. Really gross prep. Only do it in GPPs. There's no reason in like single entries to go to that gross of a play, because even if it pays off in a single entry, there are other guys that aren't as nasty. They're going to be just as low owned. And the reason why I say that, it's kind of a good thing to point out right here, is in single entries, those kind of contests, ownership gets polarized. And what I mean by that is that the high owned guys get even higher owned, and that the lower owned guys get even lower owned in single entries. And the reason for that is that in a single entry contest, when you don't have a whole bunch of other entries that you can enter, you have to pick your favorite players. You have to go out there, nut up, pick your top 6 guys, and you're not going to be as bold when you're in that situation. When you can only enter one lineup in that contest, you're not going to go to your Nick Dunlaps of the world all that often. So the reason why I say that he'd kind of be like a foolish play to use there is because the guys that aren't as crazy as Nick Dunlap, but are pivot plays, so like guys in the 6-7K range that are closer to like 2-3% projected owned, they're also going to be unowned in single entries, because even those kind of players that are just kind of like mild pivots, no one uses in those contests. They're just too scared. I'm not going to use any profanity, but they're not very bold with their lineups. Okay. So when that's the case, you can leverage against that. So I would say don't go as crazy in those kind of builds, but large field GPP, man, it's gross, but I could see it. I'm not doing it, but I could see it. Probably a stupid question, but what are my thoughts on Scotty? I love him. I bet him outright. So I don't know if you need any other thoughts than that, but I think there's a good chance he wins this week. Any other top guys, 9,400 and above, that are a core play for me, those will have to be on the Patreon page, Thomas. So I can't give away my entire player pool, as I've got paying subscribers that it wouldn't really be fair to do that to. But I gave you guys a few there, right? Like Scotty is probably the one that's obvious on there, just because I bet him outright too. You said Rahm and Koepka are min price on Yahoo. Am I playing Yahoo at all? I'm not, Justin, but if they're min price on Yahoo, jam them into every single lineup. And yeah, Ross is saying, should I will now? I might now. I don't even have an account on Yahoo, man. And I've been playing DFS for well over 10 years at this point. I don't even have one. I might have to make one after hearing that pricing. He said, thought they gave up on PGA. Yeah, I didn't even know they had PGA contests anymore. First time asking a question. Appreciate the honest answer, of course. And that's what you're going to get from me, man. You're never going to get anything except the God's honest truth. And I'm not rude about it, but I say how it is, right? I don't sugarcoat things. That's just my style. Thoughts on Nico Echeverria. So I love Echeverria this week. I'll just say I'm playing him in lineups. He's not a massive stand for me. It's like a 10% kind of exposure play. Leverage, but not crazy leverage towards the bottom end of the board. I like him because he was popping in very specific stats that I was looking at. I don't have a full time to go through all of them here, but if you watch my course breakdown video, almost all of the very like specific stats, and it's like putting on overseed, he's very good at. He's a very good player from 175 to 225. That's a key stat category I was looking at. And one of them was like left miss percentage. Left misses around this golf course are penalized a lot more than right misses off the tee. You can tell I really nerd out about my models and whatnot, but it's how I have an edge out there with what I do in my modeling. People out there, when they make their models, by the way, throw in like 4 or 5 key stats, and it's like shots gained approach, shots gained off the tee, birdie percentage. And they wonder why their model isn't all that helpful. You have to actually know things about golf courses to be able to build a model that's helpful. So, for example, Echeverria, he hardly ever misses left. So that was another thing that was very favorable for him. So yeah, I'm playing him this week. Burmester is in my player pool, James. He is popular though. So if you're going to use him down in that 6K range, just know that it's not giving you as much differentiation as some of the other guys around him. And just to give you an idea of like a pivot around him at that portion, let me find Burmester. Let's see. So he's $6,900. I've got him like 6% owned, whereas Dietrich's half that ownership. So if I'm having to get different, give me a Dietrich. But if I'm already different towards the top, Burmester is going to make a lot of those kind of lineups. He said, thanks for the hard work. I appreciate you, KB. Harris English has about 6-7% ownership behind him. I've heard him touted by people because he's a good course fit. I don't disagree with that, but the steam is there for sure. I mean, he's been touted up enough, especially on a major championship week where he's going to be at least 6-7% owned. It wouldn't surprise me if single entries that he might be closer to 10% owned even. So just a word of caution there. If you're going to use him, make sure you get different elsewhere. Any love for Davis Thompson? So he's a 5 out of 10 for me, Nate D. So I can't really say I have a lot of love for him. He's just kind of a guy for me. So I don't think he's a terrible play. Like he's a 5 out of 10, right? I don't have him at like a 3 out of 10. But, and it's a huge but, just kind of a guy for me. So I don't really have a hot take either way there. What are my thoughts on Keegan? Haven't heard about him much. You may not have heard a lot about him, but he is getting some steam with the ownership projections. I've got him about 8% projected owned, which is significantly higher steam than some of the other guys around him. So I think that a lot of people like to play him at these driving heavy golf courses, which there's a lot of truth to that. He's a ball striker. You play them at that style of golf course, but he is getting a few more plays than I would like. Like if he was 5% owned, I would love him this week. And he's closer to 7-8% owned. I still like him, but I don't like him as much, if that makes sense. Connors, Im, or Straka, and he said, thank you in advance. I'd go Connors out of those 3. And the reason for that is I am not playing the last 2. He said, guess not, might as well take advantage of. Oh yeah, I got to get over there, man. Yeah, I'm not playing it myself, but that pricing is wild, bro. I think people are going to play them, Justin. So just to talk about the game theory with that, if they're at the min price, they're going to get played, but not everyone's going to see that. Not everyone's going to scroll down to the minimum price and see those 2 at the very bottom. You might as well jam them in. And I actually think the best way to do it, Justin, might be to play cash lineups and then use those 2 in like every single lineup. Because if you can find cash lineups where people aren't using those 2, then what the hell are they doing? Because, and I'm assuming, I don't really know how it works with the salary on Yahoo. I've literally never played there before. But assuming if you have 2 minimum price guys, you can play Scotty, maybe a Scotty plus Rory. You can go a Rory plus Bryson lineup, perhaps, right out there with those other few spots. Yeah, like go cash and then do that. That's what I would do. In fact, there's a chance I go out there and make an account just to do that. And I don't even know if they have cash over there. I mean, I've literally never played on Yahoo before, but yeah, man, if they had that pricing on DraftKings, that would be like the easiest slate ever. He said, yeah, there's not much for tournaments over there, by the way. Just checked, and those dudes would just be slammed. Yeah, I don't know. Probably not that big of an edge then, Justin, because if that's the case with what Ross is saying, like if you're playing in like a GPP format, it's going to be really tough to beat those other people. Cash should be the way to do that. Any love for Taylor Moore? He's got the distance to get the job done around here, so I don't think he's the worst play, but 5 out of 10, man. Like when I'm stuck on a guy like Davis Thompson here, where I really don't have a hot take either way, 5 out of 10. One thing I'll say with Taylor Moore, same thing with Davis Thompson. He hits the ball a long way. So if you're looking for bombers, he kind of fits that narrative. He's not an elite tier bomber, but he hits the ball a lot further than most players, but he kind of sucks. Like same thing with Davis Thompson. And I hate to say that like a tour winner sucks, but they aren't very consistent players. They're the kind of guys that pop like a few times a year. Now, if you catch them when they pop, great. They make a ton of birdies. They finish top 10. They're for sure going to make the optimal lineup, but they're really tough to go out there and time up. So yeah, 5 out of 10 on them. I don't get them right very often. So usually my best take on those kind of guys is to give you a 5 out of 10 because I don't want to give you the wrong information, right? Tell you that I really like him and then he sucks, because those kind of guys, that happens quite often. You said they have no veteran tournaments there. You would be a veteran over there. Oh God. Oh, I've never played before, so I don't know if I'd be a veteran, right? Unless they know my name and account and do that, but who knows? Can I get behind Ricky at all after a decent showing? Oh, that's a tough one, but I think so. So he's played well at this kind of a track before, like the long PGA Championship, US Open kind of styles, but he's also played very poorly. So I can only get behind him, Jason, in a large scale GPP, but like cash single entries, that sort of thing, absolutely not. I would not be using them. He said also Michael Kim. No Michael Kim love because of the injury situation. So he did tweet out today that he's dealing with a little bit of a sore back. So I'm going to stay away from that one. He said I wouldn't be a veteran. That's what I'm saying, bro. Like I could play against some slapdicks over there, couldn't I? I'm making an account. Because put it this way, if I could play in a beginner contest, that exponentially raises the chances that they're not going to play those two guys down low, right? Like if you're a beginner, you're slapdick, you have no idea what you're talking about. You're probably not even scrolling the whole way down. I found my edge. We're going to do it. Dude, that sounds like a lot of fun. Beating up on some people that don't know how to play DFS and I'm a tout. That's not fair, but hey, I haven't earned my veteran badge yet, so they're going to get it. Ryan Fox for the top 10. He's coming in off a win, and he is a bomber. He's not somebody that I have a lot of exposure behind this week, Jack, but he does make sense from the form and from the course fit angle. He said, why is Degenerate not playing Keith Mitchell? He's probably not playing him because he's chalky, and that's a respectable decision, right? You're not always going to play guys that other people like, and I know my guy DGen loves fading guys that are high owned to that 6 and 7K range, so it's probably why he's fading them. And honestly, it doesn't surprise me. That's exactly what I would have expected from James. That's his MO, right? Fading that donkey chalk. And compared to the guys around him, he's donkey chalk, especially from the ownership angle. He said studs and duds are balanced. Studs and duds will be extremely popular. Balanced will be a lot lower owned. If you want my full take on the ape, go back to about 10 minutes in. He said, what are my thoughts on Norgard Moeller early in the week? You thought you liked him. And he said the podcast were also on him. I don't think he's going to be chalky, though. So if you like him, man, go ahead and feel free to play him. He's super long off the tee. He hits the ball like 325 carry. So if you're looking for a bomber down low, he fits that quite well. I would say, though, that he's not the best around the green player. He's not a very good putter, too. So I worry about that aspect for him. Why are Ryan Fox and Billy Z so expensive? Yeah, probably because the DraftKings interns are slapdicks. That's probably the reason for that. By the way, if you guys haven't already smashed the like button, go ahead and do so if you haven't already. He said, do I like Pendrith? I do. He's a bomber, so I'll be playing him. He said, your $1 million lineup, if I want to split it, are those 6 guys? Dude, I'm playing all but one of those. All but 2 of those guys that you're using there. So I'm not going to have that lineup. But hey, if you take it down, maybe slide me like a little bit as a kickback. I wouldn't decline. Let's put it that way. Is Bud Colley getting some ownership? Not really. I've got him sub 5%. So if ownership was the issue there, no worries there whatsoever. And you said, where is DGen 75? He's been dealing with some health issues. So if you check out his X/Twitter, I'll be able to check up on my guy DGen. But yeah, he's sidelined right now, kicking cancer's ass. So make sure to check him out. Show him some love over there on Twitter/X. And he'll be back as soon as he's feeling better, which hopefully will be any week now, because all of us are rooting for the big guy for sure. He said, all thanks. Thank you for the insight, of course. Thoughts on Thor Bjornsson. So I gave some thoughts before, but I'll give a few more thoughts here, Jason. He's like a 6.5 out of 10. I actually like him more than most, I would say, because he hits the ball country mile. 320 carry, which is very useful around this kind of golf course. All right, let's go through some DraftKings stuff here real quickly. I've got a prop stream, by the way, that I'm doing at 8 p.m. Eastern time on my YouTube channel. So I apologize that we're going to go through this last section rather quickly here, but I've got to do my prop stuff on my YouTube, which, by the way, is GSLukeDFS. If you guys want to catch the prop stuff over there, that's underdog and prize picks. That's also matchups and 3 balls on the sports books. So going to be hopping into that here in a few minutes, completely deep diving that. let's talk about some of the contests available, which are mostly getting full here. So if you're waiting till Wednesday to get into your contest, start moving that up to Tuesday so you can get into all the good stuff. But I'm entering a lot of single entry. So you can see I'm this $100 single entry, this $200 single entry up here towards the top, and then the big $5 GPP, which the payout structure on it isn't terrible. This is actually the secondary $5 that they went out there and put out there. This one is the same kind of payout structure to first, so it's 20%. But that's how quickly these are fulling. Now you even have the secondaries going out there, and this will be filling in the next few minutes. So if you haven't already entered your contest, haven't already reserved anything, get to it, right? Chop at this point. You've got nothing to wait for, because anything with a reasonable payout structure that is big for a major is going to be filling over the next hour or so. So we're not going to spend much time there because a lot of those contests have already filled. Plus, I've got a live stream in 4 minutes. Now let's go through the actually putting together lineups, which we spent almost the entire live stream going through here. So we're just going to kind of go through the motions now and show you what that actually looks like. But up top, we mentioned having to get different down low if you use that chalky lineup construction. So let's go ahead and show you what that looks like. So we're going to start with a Bryson, a JT as my second man in. These are 2 core plays for me that I'm getting well over the field on. Now we're going to have to get different with our last 4 spots. And because it is forcing us into the bottom end of the board, we're going to have players to get that differentiation with, but we're going to have to be very intentional about it. So let's throw in a McIntyre at $7,500. He was sub 5% owned. Our next man in, let me actually look at the bottom end of the 7K range on my projections. I just want to make sure I'm giving you guys somebody that's actually sub 5% owned. So this lineup actually makes sense. Let's go with a Akshay Bhatia, who I've also got at sub 5%, close to 5%, but still under that sort of mark. I have 2 more guys there at $6,900. I'm not a huge fan of Ricky Fowler. In fact, I'm not using him, but you could use him for some differentiation. Let's throw in a Sergio Garcia. I've got him at just a little bit under that 5% mark. And then as long as your last man in here isn't super chalky, so I might actually avoid a Harris English here. So I mentioned before that he's closer to like 7-8%. If this was in the big $5 or $25 GPP, I might avoid somebody like Harris English, just because in some of the contests for a major, where you have 50 to 100,000 entries, right? Not the secondary GPPs, but the main ones that you have for a week like this, you have a much higher chance to duplicate yourself. So for my last man in, I'm really trying to make sure I'm not taking chalk. So like I'd be looking at Pendrith, maybe somebody a little bit cheaper, like even leaving $100 and taking a Rasmus Højgaard, leaving $200 on the table and taking his brother Nikolai down there at $6,500. That's the kind of lineup construction I'd be looking at in a large field GPP. But if you were in a single entry, something a little bit smaller, you could afford to take a Harris English there, because you don't have to have as much differentiation in a contest where you're trying to take down against like 500 to 1,000 other entries, right? When you're not going against 100,000 other people, you don't have to always go out there and have the nuts. You're going to have a much lower chance, by the way, of duplicating yourself with other people out there too, which is why Harris English is somebody that you could still take. So the lineup construction, something that we've talked about a lot throughout this entire live stream, which I'm sorry I had to keep that one a little bit quick there, but we did talk about that quite a bit. But that's all I've got, guys. Best luck out there with all the exposure that you guys are getting to. And for that prop and betting live stream, as I mentioned, that'll be live in a few minutes over there on my YouTube channel. So best of luck out there with all of your exposure, and come back out there for rounds 2 through 4, where we're going to be going through all the showdown stuff for Friday through Sunday. But that's all I've got. Best of luck, and I'll see you guys out there tomorrow night.